If you've ever tried to buy a lens as a beginner, you'll know that it's extremely confusing, and you'll have noticed that we tend to give different kinds of lenses labels based on what they do. So for example, a landscape lens, or a street photography lens, or maybe the most common, portrait lenses, which is usually a lens around the 85mm mark. Problem with that is that it's wrong, and not only could it mislead new photographers into spending more money than they need to, it could also crush your creativity. Let me explain why there's no such thing as a portrait lens, as well as showing you some photos to spark your creative juice machine, and I'll also reveal my favorite lens to take portraits on, despite the hate I'll inevitably get for it in the comments. Look, when you're new to a skill or a hobby, your natural instinct is to want to know all of the rules. Like, you want everything in the form of right versus wrong, or black versus white. You want to know the correct way to do everything. That's totally understandable, especially when you're doing something creative, since you're being quite vulnerable and really putting yourself out there when you're making art. But that's not how the Force works. That's not how any art works, really. But if that's true, then how come everybody says you should shoot portraits on an 85mm portrait lens? Well, you can, and lots of people do. The 85mm focal length makes it really easy to get that nice blurry background so that your subject stands out more, and it can also help you to put more distance between your camera and their face, which can result in a much more flattering, natural, compressed look. It would flatter me if you liked this video and subscribe to the channel. Part of the trouble starts when we're referring to lenses like this, because it could lead new photographers to believe that you can't shoot landscapes on a portrait lens or portraits on a landscape lens, which isn't just wrong, it could make beginners feel like they need to spend way more money to get lots of different lenses for all the different things they want to shoot. Thing is though, the 85mm look is not the only correct way to take a portrait. Maybe if you're doing passport photos, that's the look you need to go for, but chances are you're going to want to take portraits of your friends and your dog and people with cool outfits, and doing all of that on just an 85mm portrait lens can be a bit creatively suffocating. Here's the thing about portraits. They're a way to visually communicate information, right? It's a way to tell a story about somebody. And so for those sort of very corporate headshot real estate agent photos, you basically want to communicate, here's what Jim looks like so you can recognize him at a conference. Fine, but if you're trying to be even 1% more artistic and creative, there are loads of different stories you might want to tell. And chances are at some point, you'll want to tell those stories with a little bit more context than just a face. What's the person wearing? Who are they with? What are they doing? Where are they? And who else is there? And that's why so many photographers, myself included, prefer to use wider lenses to shoot portraits. I get asked all the time by new photographers what lenses they should buy, and I always say the exact same thing. Buy a 50 and leave it on the camera until you don't need my advice anymore. But don't just take my word for it. Take Annie's. Annie Leibovitz, that is, quite possibly one of the most famous and influential portrait photographers of all time, and undoubtedly a very successful one. Annie Leibovitz likes a 55. Personally, I go a little crazier, but we'll get to that. There are a couple of other reasons I don't like 85mm lenses, and sure, a lot of it is just down to personal taste, but there are a few reasons that you might want to consider. First, personally, I just don't think 85 is a very versatile focal length. It can just feel really constricting, like you're looking at everything through binoculars, and it's not how my eyes at least see the real world. And what that means is that a lot of the time you can end up kind of taking the same photo over and over again, just head and shoulders, blurry background. Variety is the spice of life, and I like it spicy. If you like it spicy, why not pick up a shirt or a tote bag or a beanie or something? Links below. The other big reason is distance. A big mistake people make when it comes to gear, especially in photography, is, I think, focusing a lot too much on the end result and not thinking about what it's like to use. And for me, the fun of photography isn't looking at my photos afterwards, it's doing it. The issue with 85 is to fit your subject in the frame, you have to be standing kind of far away. Figuring out your look and interacting with your subject is super important so that they can relax when you're aiming a camera at them. Building that rapport and putting people at ease is a big part of making a great portrait, and creating an environment where your subject can be vulnerable and be themselves. It's a lot easier when you're at a normal talking distance instead of the other side of the room with your long lens. But here's the truth. You can take amazing portraits on any focal length as long as you like the way it looks. Art is hard, and making something incredible is kind of impossible if you're not really inspired by the process. So if you like that super compressed bokeh background 85mm look, great. If you want to shoot portraits on a 50 and include a bit more context and get a bit closer, also great. If you want to shoot portraits on a 35 where the environment your subject is in is also super important, great. If you're as crazy as me, well, here it is. My favorite lens for portraits is the Nikon 16mm fisheye. Is it a heavily stylized look? Yeah. And while that can sometimes be a little bit of a constraint, I really love being able to capture a super exaggerated version of reality. The fisheye done right can make everything look more than it is, which can really push the story you're telling to the forefront of a photo. It's also quite visually striking, which I like. It's awesome for all kinds of photography, landscapes, astro, fashion. It's really good for shoes and that sort of thing, concerts. The point is this: there's no such thing as a portrait lens, or a landscape lens, or a street photography lens. You can do portraits or landscapes or any flavor of photography on whatever lens you like. Those labels are prescriptive at best, and I know loads of people who make amazing images on the wrong lenses. How focal length can change the way your images look is an awesome creative tool. So use it like one and be creative. Do things outside of the box, and you never know what you might learn. Stay hydrated and create art.